Hello, everyone. I'm Alan Furstenberg,
And I'm Mark Tucker, and we are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. It's been a busy week, Mark, hasn't it?
It has. There's just been a lot going on. Hey, can I tell you about a side project I finished that just got released to
Sure.
Alexa?
Talking about stuff that's been going on. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this has been a side project that I've been working on, weekends and late at night. It's called Home Number. It's an Alexa skill with a companion website where you can sign up to get a phone number. So you could treat it like it's your home phone number. Give it out to people, friends or family, or give it out to people that you don't want to be bothered with spam calls or anything, and you give it out, and you can receive voicemails and SSMS messages. Sorry, or
SMS.
send
There
out
are
send out
too many
texts.
acronyms here.
Send out texts, or actually make a phone call through your Alexa device or through your web-based contact list.
Oh,
So
very, very cool.
yeah, so if you're interested in that, just DM me on Twitter, and I can give you some more information.
That sounds pretty cool. I need to check that out as well, I think. Uh, as for personal projects, I launched a personal project as well last week, actually in conjunction with some of the stuff we'll be talking about today, called Crosstalk. And it is a voice first crossword puzzle, basically. And I have to admit, it was inspired by some of the printed crossword puzzles that you put out for Alexa Dev Days. I
Oh
wanted
yeah.
I wanted to do a crossword puzzle for Assistant Dev Days, and I thought it would make sense to have one that was voice first. So I went and developed a voice first version that has an excellent screen companion as well. Again, the name is Crosstalk. So you could say, talk to Crosstalk on a smart speaker on your um, Android device or on a smart display. So
Yeah,
a couple of
I
side
played it.
projects we've been doing.
Yeah, so I actually played Crosstalk this last week. I finally
Uh-oh.
got my Nest Hub hooked back up after my Wi-Fi disaster of last week, and had a good experience. It was fun. It was nice to see on a display how it would zoom into what was the group of letters that that it was working on, and you could you know, it just worked well, and I was puzzled on one of them. Five down on the Google Assistant Dev Days was the one that was challenging. I used all kinds of different means. I finally resorted to going through your Twitter feed and finding any word that ended in T that had an I in it.
I pulled that one directly from my Twitter, and what it was talking about, of course, was ambient. So one of the and I guess if you now play it, you know what five down is. I'll give you that clue. But I think it's important because that was really one of the driving points that they made during the keynote for Alexa
Mhm.
Dev for Assistant Dev Days
Yeah.
was how much they were trying to drive towards this notion that the assistant was going to be with you everywhere you were during the day.
Yeah, so I had been concentrating like on each of the different details of this was released, and this was released, and this was released, and I failed to take a step back and see what the overarching thing was, which was ambient, and totally agree with you. And we're going to talk today, actually, right,
Right.
about some of the details on
Oh,
Google
yeah.
Assistant Dev Days. So great
So
event.
it was an interesting event. One of the things, Brett Kinsella, who we spoke with on his podcast last week, made a great comment at the after party. Basically, he said, one of the things he said was that for developers, this fills a gap in their heart that was missing from the hardware event the previous week. And in some ways, I think that's true.
Yeah.
It kind of said, hey, we didn't forget about you, and then it threw a bunch of stuff at us for us to digest.
Mhm.
Um, I've got some reservations about some of it, but overall, I think it was a good event. But I also don't want to neglect the fact that at Amazon's hardware event, there was some developer stuff that was hinted at,
Yes.
and that's the dancing echo. So
Oh, the dancing Echo. I like that. So that's you're talking about the new Echo Show that rotates to the person that's speaking. Is that what
that
we're referring to?
that's the one. But it sounds like developers have some access to developers have an
Yes,
API to work with it.
very interesting. So I was able to get a front row seat. I guess there was a separate feed for some reason for the Alexa hardware event. So I got to see some things, and then there was a special Alexa Champions invite after that, where we got to get some details on how you would code for that. So basically, the Echo Show screen is now on a 360 rotating base, and the screen can follow you. It doesn't actually go a full 360 around because there is a stop point, so at which point it will like rotate back around the opposite direction. But that's okay. But you can actually develop for it. You can either have the screen follow you, or within the screen frame, you can identify like a primary blob of something that it's following. And as you move in the screen, then you could rotate things on the screen. So they showed things like a panoramic or a panning photo.
Mm-hmm.
And as you moved like this, then you would actually like see more of the photo. There's a number of interesting things that you can program for it. But there was like lots of stuff where people were saying it's creepy, but it's all, you can turn it off and you can, but anyway, it doesn't go as far as I'd like it to though, because I would like to actually have like a game where it would rotate to a specific spot where a player was. Like, imagine a card game where you don't want somebody else to see your hand.
Oh, sure. It's a great way to provide private information.
Yeah, so as it rotates to the next person, then it can show some information that only that person, but that's not available yet. But
hopefully so. No, it sounded also like there was a way to make the monitor dance, literally like dance in celebration.
Oh yeah, you can make it vibrate.
Okay.
So you can do just your typical rotation around the axis. But you could also add some like shimmy to it. So like if there was like an earthquake effect, you could have something going on the screen. And
that's cute. You see, I like that because it starts bringing this notion between the fact that we've got something online and some real world physical presence. And I think that's one of the things I really like about where voice first in a broad sense, this ambient computing notion in a broad sense is going, because it says, you've got a physical world that you're working in.
Yep.
Here's how we bridge the digital world and the physical world.
Yeah, and it's just a little bit of delight factor.
So that sounds like it's a fun thing. But you're right, the assistant event had a lot of stuff thrown at us. I mean, I didn't count, but it's at least a dozen or two things, many of which are available now, others of which are kind of hinted at and promised. But it's an awful lot of stuff. I think the first, and they grouped it up into 3 interesting chunks, which I thought was kind of interesting.
So mobile was interesting.
Mobile is very interesting, and I've got really mixed feelings about where they're going with mobile. The first big notion that they presented there was this. They previously had a couple of specialty intents for mobile, so you could say things like, ask Nike to start my run, or even just start my run, and it would open up the app on your Android phone triggered by your voice.
Mm-hmm. So assistant is interpreting the voice, but then making something happen with an app that maybe isn't necessarily originally made for voice, but you can
correct and
link into it or something.
Yeah,
or let's start it.
Well, exactly. One of the interesting things about most Android apps is that they also have this notion of deep linking and this notion of intents, except they weren't voice intents, and they use the same terminology even. So you could say, even before now, you could have external triggers to an Android app that would launch directly into a particular screen or do something specific in Android. And this has existed for years. This is nothing new on the Android side. Android developers are very, very familiar with this concept. What they added, I guess about a year and a half ago, was the ability to say, we're going to have in a limited number of verticals a way for you to launch directly into some of these intents.
Okay.
but it was very, very limited. It was literally just launching in one intent, very narrow. Now they've expanded it, and they've expanded in several big ways. For starters, they increased from what was originally 4 verticals now to 10 verticals. So previously there were narrow things like start a run, start a workout, hail a taxi, to a wide range of stuff, including sending messages, processing photos and taking photos, other social things, all sorts of other communication things, more food prep stuff. All told, there are now over 60 intents that you can trigger in a more native conversational way.
Well, and so some of the examples that, if I remember them, Twitter, Wayfair, Mint, eBay, there were a number of ones that were showing off these new 60 plus built-in intents. That reminds me of actually on just something that was recently announced on the Alexa side too, was this ability to do deeper mobile integration.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, there's very few intents actually. There's a couple ones like starting and searching, but then everything else is custom. You can do your own. And the big example that they had at the Alexa event a while ago was TikTok. You could start TikTok and you could take a picture and you could, just this big thing. It's in preview. So it seems like in a way, Alexa was catching up and kind of raised the bar a little bit, and then
Google raised the bar again. Yeah,
quite a bit. Right.
Well, I think the interesting thing also, though, is that previous to this, there wasn't a more generic way to say searching for something or starting. There were very narrow ways of doing it, but now they've opened up. They've created a very specific generic search for something through your app. And a more generic way to launch things into different parts of your app. The goal, though, is very much, it's not conversational. It's still, I wouldn't say it's fire and forget, but it's much more get you directly into the specific intent in your app and do something there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's send a tweet. And you're not going to go in and do a lot with that. You're going to be dictating a tweet and sending it.
But the way that they approach it is a lot different than the old open app. Do this, do that. You're
very
not
much
voice
so.
Navigating. You're like, I want to do this thing, and this one thing is done a lot, and I can benefit by doing it with voice, and so you can get right into what you need to do.
Exactly, and I think that's a big thing that this whole voice first notion is really beginning to sink into people, is that it's not voice navigation. This isn't taking accessibility and amping it up a little bit. It's really trying to go in and saying, well, how do people do things? How do people think about doing things? They just want to do them. And
what are the top 2 or 3 or 5 use cases for this given app, and let's get people right into the nitty gritty there.
Exactly. Now, there's a downside to this, and there's this one thing about this that really is really frustrating me. That they've launched these 60 new intents, and these are fantastic, but they only launch them for Android. So if you try, if you go to your speaker and say, "Hey, G, start a run," the speaker is not going to know what to do with that because that's an app, it's an app action, not an action. And I have problems with that. Now, they did announce 2 new, what they're calling built-in intents. So these 60 things are called built-in intents.
Mm-hmm.
They've now announced that smart speakers can handle 3 built-in intents, which or will be able to soon. So they've been able to support play a game for a while now. And now they're adding teach me something and read to me.
Okay.
And variants on these as well as built-in intents on the speaker side.
So that's kind of like an implicit intent way of getting to your skill or potentially or action in your case, getting to your voice app via something generic without invoking it by name.
Exactly.
Okay.
And now I know Alexa sort of has this with the what is it?
The can fulfill intent request.
Yes,
that's been around for a while, and I haven't seen any great success from using that. There were some other name-free invocation things that were released or I guess announced in preview at the Alexa event that I haven't been able, I signed up for the preview and have not been able to get in yet. So I don't know, but yeah, that's more of a way. I think they're supposed to be able to pair together where if you do one and the other, it's supposed to increase your ability to it's basically the SEO way of getting to your skill.
Yeah, this is all about SEO and discovery at this part of it.
Well, interestingly, before we stop talking about the mobile stuff, is that what Amazon announced is the same ability to deep link into mobile apps, but it includes iOS and Android.
Interesting.
So you could use Alexa on your phone to get into those things, and a number of phones, at least on my Android, I can replace Google Assistant with Alexa, or if I'm in the Alexa app, I can voice command from there and then have that do the mobile invocation.
I'm really curious. I've never seen anybody using Assistant or Alexa, for that matter, on iOS. So it's interesting to me how it works and how well it works in both of those cases.
Yeah, we have some people on our team that are Apple fans, and so seems like it's working okay for them.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't have an iPhone.
No, me neither. No, so the other, some of the other big things they talked about were improving ways for discovery and retainability, making sure people can come back to it. So one of the things that I've had a lot of people ask me about, and it's not entirely clear exactly how some of this works, is how this increased discovery is going to work. So they were showing examples of, searching for a pop music star, and then it automatically surfaces other actions or other apps that may be able to provide that information as well. And when they talked about it technically, they basically said, and you don't need to do anything else. So I don't know how any of that actually works.
Yeah, I was pausing the screen during the video at those different parts, trying to figure out where it was showing me this other thing. Is it something that's at the very bottom of the screen?
Yeah, it said it'll show up in suggestion chips at the bottom.
Oh, okay. Because I could very, I'm like, I don't know where it's showing me. They were like going so fast through the stuff. I was trying to figure out where this additional discoverability on mobile apps was coming from, and I couldn't see it.
Yeah, it's through the assistant, so it's not clear exactly how this hooks in. One of the things I did find in a lot of cases, what they were also saying is there's nothing really much that you can do to encourage, to encourage this, but feel free to say something about it in your app itself. So feel free to tell people about this. Okay. I guess.
How are you going to tell them? No, that's interesting.
Well, again, it kind of goes back to the customer retention, is being able to say, come back, whenever you do these other things, you may be suggested to us, and we're here.
Okay, that's interesting.
But it's nothing like the shared routines that I think are new on the Alexa side, right?
Yeah, shared routines are interesting because you can do all kinds of things with routines. They can be triggered from a number of different things, and you can have it do things. Like I have my assistant every day at 8:30 give me an affirmation or something. So, but only on certain devices. But you can even have like a voice phrase, like maybe you don't remember exactly what it is to start something, or it's extra long. You can give it your own voice phrase and personalize it. So that you can kick off routines. Well, now if you're a creator of these routines, especially like if you have a custom skill and you have a routine that's good around that, then you could actually copy that routine and turns into a URL that you can then share around on social media, or to, I guess, send to friends and family, and then they can click on it, and then it brings it up in their app just as if they had typed all the stuff in, but all the fields are filled in, and they can hit save, or they can customize it however they want at that point. So that's interesting.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah, it would be more useful if you could start an Alexa skill deep linked into a specific intent as opposed to just launching it. I know that's been something that I've been.
Have we talked about this before? Because that.
Yeah. I did this whole Twitter campaign where every day I'd say, I finally got it up to, I think it's number 6 on the Alexa user voice. It's got over 100 different people that want the feature, but it's been out there for a year.
I feel like I'm surprised every time we talk about this, because I'm like, how do they not support this?
I don't know.
I mean,
it would be so much more useful if I could deep link into a specific intent, share that routine, and bam.
See, and the equivalent complaint on the Google side, which is not the same because we can deep link in, is that we want to be able to deep link in and provide user parameters at the same time. So while you can create a routine and hard code in parameters,
you can't. You
can't create a routine and say, and let the user say something that fills in this.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, I can create a routine that says record my weight, and it'll prompt me for my weight, and I say it and we're done.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't have something that says, tell record my weight that I weighed in at 185, because you can't give it parameters in your invocation phrase. It has to be a constant invocation phrase.
Yeah, that's got to be coming, because that's
I don't know, we've been asking for it for like 2 years. So
okay, well, maybe we'll get up first, who knows,
but
in 2 years from now.
But it does lead to the fact that we now have something called app shortcuts.
Yes,
on the Google side.
That was confusion with me. I was like, okay, and part of it I think was me struggling trying to say this is in the mobile app bucket, and this is in the assistant device, smart speaker, smart display bucket. So yeah, what is the difference between routines and shortcuts?
I'd love to know. One of the things to keep in mind is that before routines were called routines, they were called shortcuts.
Interesting.
So I don't think these are the same shortcuts, but there are a lot of things about this that at least aren't very clear to me yet so far.
So is it just mobile apps, just a way of personalizing? So it's kind of like a very specific routine that's just for apps?
It's a very specific routine that is just for apps. It has the interesting feature that it can be maintained by voice. So it's a voice first command to create them, which is unique.
That is.
It's also, and it's not quite clear to me how it relates to a couple of other announcements they've made on the Android side recently, so that you can create, I think that, you can create triggers that are sitting on the home screen. And these are accessibility features. And in fact, they made another accessibility feature announcement related to this just last week. So it may be related to that part of it, and yet they're making it more public and not trying to hide it behind an accessibility facade. I don't know. And for all I know, it actually just leverages routines under the hood and doesn't tell anyone. But it sure does sound familiar. I think the other big difference is that routines can do a bunch of things. So you can say, turn on these 3 lights, play this music, and, tell me something. Or
lots of triggers, lots of actions.
Right, lots of triggers, invoke this action, then this action, then this action, and each one is going to give me some summary. A shortcut just runs one app action, or invokes one app action intent.
But it released with quite a few apps that allow you to do that. So I was pretty impressed when I brought up the list and saw that there were quite a few.
Yeah. one of
that
one
were
of the
available.
one of the neat things, and I've got to give them a lot of credit on this one, about the event in general, is that they were clearly pitching this part of the event to Android users. And they were saying, if you develop an Android app now, you can make it voice enabled in less than a day.
Mm-hmm.
And when you looked at the technical side of what they were doing, it's basically saying, add these commands to this XML file, and poof, you're invoking, this will suddenly start working. So it was very much trying to pull in Android developers into the voice world.
Yeah.
And I
no,
think,
that is, yeah.
And while I think that's a really, really smart strategy in some ways, I have two big concerns about it. And the first is that it now creates this really big divide, that you now have some things that will work on Android only and some things that will work everywhere on the assistant, what they call native assistant. And that bothers me, because that's, you now need to start thinking, well, where is this going to work? Is this an app action and I don't remember that? Or, can I do it on my speaker? So that, I'm a little worried about that. And I'm a little worried about what that says about ambient computing, but we'll see. And I think the other angle is that there's no clear migration path from an app action to a native action. So since not all of the built-in intents are supported, I can't do start a run for my smart speaker, even though I'm about to go running on a treadmill and not outside. I don't have this fluidity of being able to move from one platform to another. And we're just getting over this problem on web versus mobile. We're finally just beginning to solve, to get past this barrier. And now we go and create it again in voice. And
we don't learn as developers.
No, we don't. As developers, we really don't.
In some ways, we're constantly learning new things, and we're, but some of the overarching, it seems like we make problems for ourselves at times.
Sometimes.
I'm just trying to give us a benefit of the doubt,
So I think that was pretty much everything on the mobile side. And again, it's all really, really exciting stuff. And most of it's available now. It's, they're encouraging people to go try it out and work with it and start getting stuff out there. So that's good.
Yeah, that is good.
So the second category of stuff that they dove into or introduced were, again, what they're now calling native assistant development. And that's the traditional conversational development that you and I, that's most similar to Alexa stuff and most of what I do. So there were a few announcements about the interactive canvas, which were exciting.
Yeah.
And a lot of other things which sound really, really interesting, but aren't available yet. And a couple of little announcements.
Well, I thought it was really interesting because that transition from the app to the assistant was this, oh, you don't like the two voices that we've made them better. And I was like, okay, I guess that's kind of an interesting way to throw that in.
And that's kind of weird, actually, since actually they have 6 voices now.
Yeah.
Or before then they had 6 voices, and then, they're making a big deal about these 2 new voices. And I'm like, okay, they're 2 new voices.
Yeah.
And just for English.
Yeah. Because there's, on Poly side, there's probably, US English, there's probably like 6 different voices that you could choose from. But only some of them are actually more of the more natural sounding. I don't remember. There's all kinds of branding or terminology of how they're calling these other special extra high fidelity voices. But
and I probably should have mentioned this, but this US only angle bothers me a bit, and it's one of the things actually when I went and looked into some of the details on the Android side that bothered me as well, is that a lot of them are also US only right now.
Yeah.
And that surprises and bothers me a great deal. I was really expecting more internationalization announcements from Google with this event.
Yeah, and that's a big, you know, I guess complaint from international developers that I hear also from the Alexa event was, okay, now how many of these are really available to outside of US? And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, you know, that would get old after a while
You know,
of hearing all these things and like, okay, well, who knows when I'm going to get access to that.
yeah. And also, you know, one of the things Google likes to talk about is, you know, the next billion users. Where do we get the next billion users from? How do we support them? What
Mhm.
do they need? How are they different from the first billion? The next billion is not in the US.
Yeah.
So you know, so doing more pitches to the US, it seems like there are huge missed opportunities from both companies, it sounds like.
Yeah, it does sound like that.
So I think the interesting stuff that we saw on the native assistant side was with the interactive canvas.
Yes, I'm a
So
fan of interactive canvas.
I'm a massive fan of interactive canvas. I want to see interactive canvas on smart speakers, and we can discuss that another time.
Interesting. So interactive canvas is using web technologies for smart displays on Google Assistant. So
Right.
Nest
Well,
Hub.
not just smart displays. It's anything that has it is smart displays and Android.
Oh, okay.
So all of the interactive canvas stuff also works on the Android assistant, which
Okay.
in a lot of ways is really cool. But yeah, it's taking the web technologies that we're familiar with already. It's HTML and CSS and JavaScript or WebAssembly, or, you know, almost anything that you can do today in Chrome.
Yeah.
You do it on a display.
Well, and it's not dictating what library you're using. You could use any web 3D
Exactly.
library or 2D games library, or you could use a Angular or Vue.js or React. You can use whatever you want.
Whatever you want. And like I said, you know, it doesn't, you know, they say JavaScript, but it's really, it includes things like WebAssembly. So if you're developing in C# and you're compiling to WebAssembly these days, it'll work in almost all cases.
So it was originally limited to games, which Alexa, their web API for games, is I guess the competing or corresponding technology.
The parallel.
Cousin?
Yeah, okay, cousin.
The platform cousin. I don't know.
Yep.
But now it's open to more, right?
Right. So now they've also opened it up to 2 new verticals, education and storytelling. And again, these 2 verticals match the 2 verticals that they also just opened up a bunch of built-in intents for. So it's no surprise. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why those, specifically those 2 additional categories shouldn't allow web API. There's a number of reasons that I've been given on the Alexa side of why you want to use, you wouldn't want to use web API for everything.
I finally saw,
and in some ways I'm like, okay, I see that, but there's these other 2 categories are so much closer to games than utility apps or whatever that I see no reason why Alexa shouldn't immediately open up for those 2 categories too. There's no reason why.
No, you know, and in fact, I strongly suspect that what we were actually seeing for a lot of the education ones was that they were creeping in under a game category.
Yeah.
And, you know, silently telling people, you know, it's a game, but really it's an educational game. You can, so, you know, it doesn't surprise me that they finally just caved in and said, look, you don't need to pretend to be a game now. We'll let you in. One of the frustrating things, though, is both of these are coming soon. So they're not actually available today. They are coming soon. How soon, I don't know, but I can't imagine this is this will take all that long.
This seems just more like an administrative thing. Like, okay, now when you submit it and if this category, just go ahead and evaluate this.
Well, it is administrative in some ways. The problem is that has a technical angle to it because the console requires you to set what category it is. And the interactive canvas won't even be enabled for non-game categories right now. You can't even get it.
Yeah, that should have been already out. There's no reason why that couldn't have been done.
Right. One of the interesting things, though, is also the Tell Me a Story one is tied to family actions. So if you are applying for Tell Me a Story, for the storytelling one, you must be certified as a family-friendly action. And that's, again, a checkbox on the console, but it's got some additional restrictions to licensing and such.
So storytelling in that context is family-friendly storytelling as opposed to graphic novel or, whatever else, right?
Yes, which on one hand I can understand, and on another hand I think it's kind of frustrating because there are certainly broad categories of storytelling that I would not consider family friendly, but are still perfectly appropriate for this sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of there are lots of podcasts out there which are storytelling in nature, and I think could be enhanced by a visual aspect that goes with them.
Yeah.
But they seem to be restricted in this case. And on one hand, I get why, but it seems like an odd restriction. To go along with this, they've introduced a new website for developers to, highlight the game development process with voice, which is always good. And coming soon, for interactive canvas only, is what they call continuous match mode. And this is really, really interesting.
Yeah, I liked that actually. It was keep the microphone open and just quick fire. You don't have to do this turn taking.
It really highlights the fact that more and more processing gets done locally on the device. So there are caveats and limitations. So this isn't the full intent matching. This isn't, conversational. This is literally give us a list of words. And if the user says one of these words with the microphone open, you'll get an event, which works in some ways and doesn't work in others. So for example, Crosstalk does not use it because I don't want to limit what words you're saying. So there's, caveats like that, but overall pushing things locally, I think, is a huge, huge win.
Yeah, I'd agree. So interesting implementation. I could see why they would limit which words it would listen for, because then that really does up the security of it, that you're not just
definitely
keeping the mic open.
There are a lot of restrictions attached to it, so it limits what words are there. The mic can only be open for a fixed period of time. I think it even encourages you to play background music while the mic is open, so that so that the user is aware that the mic is open and it fits in nicely with the game.
Yeah.
So it's very much aimed at a very, very narrow set of use cases, but I think for those use cases, it's amazing.
Yeah, no, that's good. I would expect that something like that would move over to the Alexa site at some point, because I think there's going to be a little bit of copying going on, and I think that's a good thing.
I think it's a great thing. I think it's a great thing that we've got these two companies that are competing against each other and trying to one-up each other, because that's how we get progress, really.
Yeah, that's true. We get a lot faster progress when we're like, oh, well, your competitor has this feature.
How often do you say that to the team as a champion? Because I know
I definitely do, and I'm not as shy to use the G word and say, this platform has this feature and has had it for X number of.
Oh, I use that all the time. Anyway, don't want to draw things out too much. So another interesting thing so they highlighted a little bit the actions builder, right, and some improvements and changes that are coming to it. One of the things I loved is that they talk about how it's now working faster, which is an interesting way to say, and we fixed that bug that you guys have been complaining about for a few months now. There was a bug where it wouldn't catch that you that you updated it and would keep testing against a previous conversation model. So I think that's them saying, we fixed that bug. And, you've been asking for features like trying to find, doing searches, trying to find an intent, or trying to find matches. So that's now coming as well. So good, little but good improvements to the editor. And we're getting a testing API apparently, which
Yeah.
sounds fantastic. But we don't have it yet. So I can't tell you how fantastic it is.
Is this testing of the code, the actual intent code, or is it testing of like the language model?
It is testing of a conversation, as I understand it.
Hmm.
So you've always been able to run tests against your own webhooks. That's no big deal. What this appears to do is it provides a way that you can now, using standard testing, test-driven development type stuff, and testing the conversation model and testing the whole conversation flow. So you'll be able, for example, to, as I understand, from what it sounds like, and this is kind of hinted a bit at some recent changes in Dialogflow as well, you'll be able to record a conversation using the Actions Builder test tool, the tool that we have today. You'll be able to record one of those and then play it back through your test framework and test the results.
Okay, interesting.
So this way, what you'll be able to do is go through a flow, record it, and then automatically keep testing it in the future to see if you've broken a conversation flow somehow.
Okay, well, that's interesting because, out of the box with Alexa, we have two different types of model testing. The ASR, which you would give some sort of a voice recording, and it would let you know what Alexa heard it as you saying, and then the NLU side, which would be, you could pass it a string and it would tell you which intent it mapped to. And so that's just language model changing. There's a whole series of tools out from Bespoken, and I would be interested in how they work with Google Assistant. But on the Alexa side, there's a lot of things you can do for unit testing or interaction testing, and you can set up configuration files. And even if you have like variations in how a response is going to be said, you can test if one of those things were the response as opposed to something else. So
Bespoken has some interesting stuff.
They do. So if you're definitely interested in testing, seriously testing your voice apps, then check out Bespoken.
Yep.
I do have a question though, because we're talking Actions Builder, and you've been talking Actions Builder for a while, and now there's this Dialogflow migration tool.
Yeah.
And everything that I've been doing with Jovo has been using Dialogflow version 2 for a while now. Is it time for me to migrate to Actions Builder, or are there features that I will be missing out on?
So two things. So two great answers here. The first is we now have a Dialogflow conversion tool that was announced.
Yeah.
And it does a passable job. It's certainly not completely automated. The biggest part is that you can actually upgrade a project from Dialogflow to Actions Builder, which you couldn't do before. Mm-hmm. But the second is that Jovo now has Actions Builder support directly. Yes. So that was a great announcement. So Jovo and VoiceFlow were both mentioned right on the stage as partners in this, and that was fantastic.
And I immediately just thought when that happened, it's just obvious that these are the two leaders, one in the no code or low code frame, with VoiceFlow, or with all code Jovo. The fact that Google highlighted them, and the fact that I use them, I've been using them for years, using Jovo for years on the Alexa side of things, and I know VoiceFlow supported it. It's just obvious to me that these are two market leaders that you need to take seriously. So if you're doing some homegrown framework, it's time to seriously consider switching to Jovo.
So as for switching to Actions Builder, I would do it. I had several big projects that I've been holding off on moving over until the conversion tool was available. And now that it is, I need to make an effort to move over, because there are a couple of things that you don't get, admittedly. So if you are trying to do things with location, that's not available yet. But 90% of the stuff that most people are doing, definitely you'll win out by moving over to Actions Builder, and all the new features are only available for Actions Builder.
Yeah. Now, what about, I have a number of different custom, I guess, entities or slot types that I define my own definition. Is that
those move over fine.
Those move over fine. What if I have some situations where I have slot types that are built-in types like phone number, or I don't know, are there a number of, are all of those going to be able to migrate over, or are there?
They are not. So, and I haven't checked out all of the built-in, how they have, what the conversion tool recommends for converting over built-in ones like
Okay.
that. But no, phone number isn't moved over. Pretty much they went and just supported the most basic types of any and, or there's an equivalent to any, number, date.
Right.
So those move over, but some of the more esoteric ones like first name, which never made much sense in the first place, those don't come over.
So I guess what happens, because there was some built-in, in say, now we're using terms that I don't know what I would consider a built-in entity or built-in slot type, which would be person names. That was like a whole model list of people's names,
right? But
that you don't have to pre-program, you know, because it's already done.
The problem with those in the first place is that it wasn't a full list of names, so it would reject some people's names sometimes. And
even if it was open-ended?
Well, they're not open-ended lists of names.
So in those cases, I would have to, so I guess I'm trying to think on the Alexa side, because there is a list of names and they're open on people's names. If I had something that needed to have a slot type of person's name, then I would have to create a list of people's names for the Google side of things.
Either create a list or just go down to an any type, which accepts anything.
I guess that's true.
So there's already an open-ended type.
Yeah, you're right. I keep forgetting about you get the whole text, and any is something.
Right.
Any is a totally valid option. And all right. Well, okay. Well, maybe we'll have to do that sooner than later.
I would. I think where Actions Builder is going really encourages a lot of things. I think the whole concept of a conversation flow modeling makes a lot of sense from what most conversations are trying to do.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, good to know.
The other thing that you and I have talked about, in fact, it was our first show, was action links. So action links are no more. They're now assistant links.
Oh, okay. They're still there.
And they're the exact same thing, I think.
It seemed like they were. There was some additional ones, like I dove into one of the other videos, and it was talking about JavaScript stuff, and
there is
account linking, and with the action link.
There is something they call a rich assistant link. And to use rich assistant links, you need to load in a library and you need to do some custom tags. And that's about all I can figure out.
I wish I was a rich voice dev.
I wish I was
put
a
rich on their front of
it. Anyway,
sorry, that was Fiddler on the Roof. Great.
Thank you, Mark. I'm gonna have that in my head all day today.
That will actually probably help my day go better. It's thinking about good old Tevye on the
Tevye dancing around. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Where were we? Yes. So it includes a JavaScript library, and apparently it renders a button, and it sends across account linking information if you've already linked them on your side. But it's not clear to me what that gives you, and it's not clear to me what any of this does. And when I tried it out this weekend, it completely didn't work.
Okay.
Well, and it is, however, one of the only things that is available today on the native assistant side. But I can't get it to work.
All right, so more documentation needed.
Much better documentation needed, that's for certain. But it does raise, when talking about account linking, there are supposedly a new way to do account linking called Link with Google. And they kind of say this as, if you enable Link with Google, and you have a native app solution, then you'll be able to go over to the native app and log them in, and it'll just work. And how this is different from app flip, which is already there, is completely unclear to me.
But what it sounds like is it's the, you know, it's the, what I was trying to describe, I guess, in one of our previous episodes about app-to-app account linking, where instead of starting with the login for your Amazon account and then later having the login for your website that goes along with your app, they flip it around, and you're already in the website or the mobile. Maybe it's just mobile on the Google side. I'm not sure, but you're inside that login first, and then you go and do the final step of linking to your account, linking to your app.
Maybe, and I'll be perfectly honest. I don't fully get this yet.
Okay.
The best I can figure out is that maybe one of them involves hooks to OAuth and the other one doesn't involve hooks to OAuth. I honestly can't tell right now. We're going to have to do more on that one another time, because they're important, and I reckon, you know, anything that does better account linking flows I think is good, but I don't get this one yet.
Okay.
And then they have this mysterious, they kind of teased this feature that isn't available yet called household authentication.
All right. I do have some questions on this.
Yeah.
So like if I am a person in the household and I go to Google device 1 and I start up a game, and then later I go to Google device 2 and start up that same game, am I the same person in each of those, or am I two different people?
That depends on a lot of things, which will take far more than the time we have left to discuss.
Okay.
But it does relate to whether whether you've set up voice authentication, whether you have set up voice authentication for the person doing the invocation, or whether they're a guest, or whether it's completely unverified. And there are various ways that we can check for this as developers. And although I don't have details about this, since it hasn't been released yet, I imagine it's related to that. The other interesting bit, and I touched on this one a couple of episodes ago, is that they have this notion of home storage. So there is something that is available to all of the devices on a home network. They didn't say this, but I'm wondering if the household account linking ties into that as well. So you're now able to say these authenticated users will have access to the home storage and everyone else won't.
So everybody that has access to the home storage theoretically could share their game state or whatever across sessions, but those that aren't each would have individual ones.
Correct.
Because on the Alexa side, all the devices are linked to your Amazon account, so they're all linked to one ID that gets stored. Now, recently, we've had voice profiles for a while, so I can define a voice profile for me and for each member of my household. And just recently was announced the ability to get access to a unique ID for each person. So if it recognizes you as a unique person with a voice profile, then you get your own personalization ID, which is different than the user ID, which was really the account ID.
And it was the account ID for the device. It was never the account ID for the user.
Well, the account ID is actually it's not device dependent, actually. So everybody on Alexa device, I could use any device and it would go back to that one same account.
Okay.
But with the new voice profiles, then I could have a different people. So I could have individual storage for a person base. So it sounds like in some ways the household storage thing was like by default. That was the way that Alexa did it by default, and now they're adding this additional ability to separate voice profiles into additional accounts so that you could have storage based on user as well.
So yeah, this is one of those, it's an interesting feature, and there are certainly some applications that I think will take advantage of it, but I don't see this as a huge deal. Certainly nothing as huge a deal as monetization,
yes,
which was the entire last subject that they talked about. And yet they talked about it incredibly vaguely.
Yeah, I was gonna say they really talked about this is so important about monetization, and then I didn't feel like I got any meat or potatoes
No.
with it.
So, well, but you got promises of meat and potatoes.
Okay, well,
Because all of the announcements are, coming later this year or early next year.
that always makes me chuckle. If it's not
Yeah.
something that I can sign up immediately for a preview or a beta for,
Why?
then yeah, thanks for putting a stake in the ground and saying where you were going to go.
Yeah.
But that doesn't help me.
And honestly, where we're going to go is things like we're going to support transactions, which is the equivalent of an in-skill purchase. So we're going to support transactions on a smart display, which we didn't support before.
Yeah. Oh, and that's I like Alexa's support for in-skill purchasing with displays, because you get a nice card with a button and a description, and it's a good experience.
I mean, I've never seen a transaction. I've never seen a transaction on the Assistant, for that matter, anywhere on the Assistant. But from what I've heard from people who have tried to implement it, it doesn't work at all on smart displays. This sounds like it's bringing it to smart displays and will be allowing people to enter in the credit card validation code on a smart display itself. So,
which is interesting because Alexa just sidesteps that completely and says you've got an Alexa account, an Amazon account, and we know your credit card number anyway, so that's what we're using. You don't get to enter in your own credit card.
Depending how they do it, this could actually be very interesting, because Chrome lets you enter in credit card profiles, which are active. When you go to a form field, it fills in everything.
Yep.
But it doesn't fill it in. There's a little pop-up that comes up in Chrome that says, which credit card do you want to use? You can get to pick a credit card. And then it makes you validate it with the validation number, the 3 or 4 digit number.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't store that.
It sounds like the Assistant may leverage that same technology on a smart display, which would make a whole lot of sense if they did.
That does make sense.
Which, makes me believe they won't do that. But if they did...
Oh, Alan.
Come on. We've been using this technology way too long. But if they did, that would be a fantastic way to leverage the technologies that they have in Chrome already. So that we can, that we leverage by using the keyboard where it makes sense, and using voice and display to simplify things where that makes sense.
Yes.
And I think this is one of those perfect places to do so.
Yeah, I totally agree. So then hopefully it turns out that the way that we logically think it should work is the way it actually works.
That would be really, really nice. And I think the other bonus is that, once again, it's handled locally.
Yeah.
So the credit card
is good.
So pushing more and more of the private knowledge into the devices themselves, into relatively inexpensive devices.
Yeah.
So we're not requiring $600,000 phones to do this stuff.
Yes. Very cool. Do we go through everything?
I think that was everything.
I think we did. Well,
which is good, because this has gone on way too long, I'm sure. This is probably our longest episode.
This is really long, but so I guess save it. Watch half of it and then come back later and watch the other half.
No, but I think it's all good. I think, anything that helps improve the developer environment just means we're going to have more people building more and better stuff. And I think that helps everyone, really.
Yeah, I think so too. And I love the hardware events. It's interesting to see what they're doing hardware-wise, but I'm definitely a developer at heart.
Yeah, I'm a software developer. I'm sorry. Unless you tell me, you can't show me a feature and then not tell me how I get access to it.
Exactly. So give me something that I can use to make these voice experiences better.
Yep. And I feel like making things as open as possible lets us as developers push things forward just a little.
Yeah.
Using these platforms in ways that are just outside the bounds of what they were expecting. And that pushes the whole field forward. And I think that's a good thing.
I think so too. I think it's great to know what's happening and to get access to things that, if you're listening to this or watching and you've used some of these new features and you have feedback on them, please let us know. We'd love some comments either on YouTube or through Twitter probably, and just to let us know what you're thinking about these things.
Where do you want to push the technology forward? What features do you need, or how are these features going to help you do some really awesome stuff? Because at the end of the day, that's what we want to do, is we want to help you make really awesome stuff.
And I guess that's a wrap for this episode of Two Voice Devs.
Thanks for joining, everyone. Take care.
Yeah, see you.